hits for the bench. Extra attacker coming on to even things up. To the net, Albertson scores!
The Extra Attackers Podcast with Maude and Jordan.
Hello everybody, welcome back to Extra Attackers. Maude and Jordan back here once again. How are you doing today, Jordan?
I'm good. How about you, Maude?
Pretty good. We have been off for about a week now after kind of having a little bit of a bigger gap in between episodes before the last episode. So a lot of things going on in the NHL for us to catch up on. I would say the biggest story, other than Corey Perry, which we'll get into a little bit later, has got to be the return of Patrick Kane and his choice of team, because a few weeks ago we were actually talking about Kane rumors, and I think we were mostly talking about Buffalo and Florida as potential options for him, and I don't think we mentioned the Detroit Red Wings, but that is where he has ended up signing. So what's your reaction been to that so far?
I was surprised, not so much when he signed there, but a couple of days before when the rumors were coming out that Detroit was an option, because I heard literally nothing about them. Like you said, it was Florida or it was Buffalo. But Detroit, after him signing there and thinking about it, I could kind of understand why. Like, he goes back, he gets to play with DeBrincat. They had great chemistry in Chicago. Honestly, Detroit looks like it's a team on the rise. And it's hard not to have a lot of trust in Steve Yzerman as well. So it kind of seemed like a good situation for him. Plus, he could get a little bit more money there because they weren't right up against the cap. So I'm kind of not surprised. Like, it just kind of makes sense after it happened.
Yeah, I wasn't seeing too much buzz about Detroit as a potential destination like a couple weeks ago, but then it really ramped up a few days before it happened. So at that point, it kind of seemed like Detroit was going to be the choice. I feel like Buffalo probably would have been the choice if they had a better record so far this season. I feel like that's probably the biggest reason why he didn't end up deciding to just go home. At least Michigan is somewhat close to New York, so maybe there was a little bit of that factor in there as well. And then Florida was probably obviously they're having a really good season, but they had Ekblad and Montour coming back from long-term injured reserve. I believe they had to waive Mike Riley, I think it was, to have room to actually bring them back onto the roster. So it would have been tough for them to squeeze in Kane there. And like you said, the ability for Kane to get a little bit more money from Detroit compared to a team like Florida with absolutely no cap space, it seems like a pretty good deal for the team and the player. I think the biggest thing here is that it was only a 1-year deal, because there was rumors that he was looking for a 2-year deal. But I think it's huge for the Red Wings that it's only 1 year. So there's basically zero risk here. It's zero risk and a decent amount of potential reward, even though I don't think Kane is fully the player that he used to be. He still should have a pretty positive impact overall, I'd think, right?
Yeah, I think as a veteran, he's been there, he's done that. I don't think that ever hurts your team. I'm a little bit skeptical because when it comes to hip injuries, so much, I feel like 99% of the time the players come back and they just aren't really the same. Doesn't mean like they're terrible, but they've obviously taken a step down. And we've seen similar things like Nicholas Backstrom, and he's like taking a leave of absence away from the team because it was so rough. And there's been a couple of other players that have tried and just haven't had a lot of success. I assume the medical science behind it has improved, so maybe Kane has a better chance at coming back than those players. But I agree with you. I don't know if it's going to be like the Kane that we used to know. Not that that's a bad thing. I fully see this as a perfect opportunity for Detroit to capitalize on this situation because, like you said, it doesn't hurt them. If Kane is terrible and you have to stick him on like your third or fourth line or just not play him, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't hurt you. And I honestly don't think he'll be that bad. I think he'll probably come in at like a half a point a game player. And with the chemistry with DeBrincat, that means there's even a higher chance of success as well. So I think like Detroit made out like bandits here. It's a great move for them.
Exactly. You probably get Kane onto that first power play unit right away, even though the Red Wings power play has been pretty good so far this season. They've had, I think they've had some cold stretches, but a lot of hot stretches too. You want to get that Kane and DeBrincat combo back. The Rangers tried to rekindle the Panarin and Kane combo, and it didn't quite work out as amazingly as everyone hoped, but it's not like he was horrible for the Rangers. He was pretty good overall, but just he wasn't like as impactful as he's been in the past. Whereas I think Detroit, there's a little bit of lower expectations than when he went to New York. It's like when he was traded to New York, it's like, oh, we're getting a superstar, we're getting this amazing winger. Whereas Detroit, it's they already have very good forward depth, and it's just like, oh, let's add this other guy who has a lot of talent and has won before. It just kind of seems like a no-brainer, where I can't see this going poorly for the Wings at all. It seems like, especially with, I said their forward depth is already really good. If this doesn't work out, they won't exactly be hurting for offense still.
No, that's true. And like before the season, they weren't one of the teams picked to really make the playoffs. They were kind of behind Buffalo, Ottawa, those teams, as like they still need a little bit more time to take that next step. But they've done surprisingly well to start the season. Obviously, they've cooled off from their incredibly hot start at the start of the season. But at the same time, they've still shown a lot of promise, and Kane only adds to that. So I think they could potentially push for one of the wild cards, and I wouldn't be surprised to see them there.
I agree. It's tough for me to admit because we were roasting Detroit at the beginning of the season and basically giving them no credit and saying like no shot they're going to be better than Ottawa, but they are better than Ottawa clearly for a multitude of reasons that are not entirely just because of Detroit being better on paper, but because of many things going on in Ottawa that we will also we will also get into later in this episode. But yeah, it seems pretty good for Detroit. Like I said, only a 1-year deal, 0 risk. He should provide a decent amount of offense. Like if I had to predict, I would probably say he would be at about like a 50 to 60 point pace in the remaining games. However many he plays, probably something around like 50 to 60 games in total. So if he gets like 40-ish points in that's pretty good for less than 3 million. I don't see how you could criticize this deal really, unless you just don't like Patrick Kane as a person, which I have heard that opinion from people, but I am not an expert on his issues to be sure, so I can't make a judgment call on that.
Same here. I don't know much about him, much about the inner circle. I know there were allegations a couple of years ago that were, I think they were eventually dropped, from what I remember, or he was exonerated. Either way, yeah, don't know much about that, but on paper as a hockey move, it looks great.
Mm-hmm. And I guess on that note, we might as well get into another player who has been around the league for a long time.
Another former Chicago Blackhawk.
Yes, that is true. Another player who has departed from the Chicago Blackhawks, who is now in some controversy, which is Corey Perry, obviously. This has been the talk of Twitter for a few days now, and we actually got an update today, which was Corey Perry releasing a statement himself, effectively apologizing for what he did, but it's a little weird because he's apologizing for something that no one knows what he did, basically. Like, still not even like a vague description of it from the team or from him, and obviously he's not going to say what he did, but to me it was just a little bit weird reading an apology for something that no one has like any context for, right?
It is strange. Like you see people comment on it like, yeah, that seems like a good apology, but depending on what he actually did, that could change your mind right away, right? Obviously we know it's something that wasn't criminal. The Blackhawks were very specific in clarifying that. But from the rumors at this point, it seems that he had an incident involving alcohol in front of sponsors at a team event of some sort. We don't know how far that goes necessarily, and it doesn't necessarily line up with the former rumors we've heard where there was some sexual implications between a team employee.
Mm-hmm. So do we effectively have like confirmation that it wasn't anything along those lines?
I don't know if we have confirmation on that. The running theory at this point is that it was some sort of interaction at a team event. What I've seen, I think it was what's his name on Daily Faceoff?
Is that Frank Cervalli?
That's it, Frank Cervalli.
Mm-hmm.
I'm pretty sure he said that from one of his sources. Kane was drunk at a team event that involved sponsors.
Perry, not Kane.
Sorry, not Kane.
Just not to implicate Patrick Kane.
Yeah, not to implicate Kane. Sorry. Perry was drunk at a team event involving sponsors, and he
Hmm.
got overly intoxicated. And obviously, in front of sponsors and teammates and things like that, that's a really bad look, depending
Hmm.
on what
Yeah.
happened or what was said. I like obviously like I can't like I'm speculating here, but based off of how it was worded, it seemed like it was just like he got rowdy, I guess is the best way to say it, and maybe
Hmm.
said something he shouldn't have said. Again, it's not criminal, so I highly doubt it was an incident of sexual assault or something like that, or sexual harassment.
Yeah, certainly hope not.
You hope not. Obviously, you can't definitively say that's not the case because whoever the victim was might not have pressed charges or something to that effect. But it seems like it was some sort of intoxication incident. He's entering the player assistance program. I really hope for the best for Perry. Obviously, like my opinion on all this could change after learning what happened, and I think this is gonna leak with
Oh
all the
yeah.
reporters talking about it. Definitely gonna leak. But I do hope that he gets some help with his demons and that he comes out of it revitalized and ready to take a new approach. Because addiction is scary. It's scary as hell.
Hmm. I, as much as you don't want to see someone suffering through addiction, it's kind of like a decent outcome in my mind that like there wasn't anything criminal and hopefully there wasn't anything like sexual related, and that hopefully it's just a man having his like personal issues that he needs to deal with, and that hopefully he can get that help. It's a little weird to me that if it's an alcohol issue, that his contract was straight terminated instead of going to the player assistance program. But I guess like whatever it was that happened while he was drunk or whatever, or something that was affected by his alcohol use, I guess was just so severe that it was a breach of contract. I do think that's a little bit strange to now be hearing that it's has a lot to do with alcohol use.
Yeah, that is strange because you've seen this before where players go into the assistance program before their contract is terminated. And
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of like the carrot that teams hang in front of players to be like, yeah, you won't lose all your money, but you have to go through the program. And it makes sense to some extent. Um, I did remember the Jim Montgomery incident where he was effectively let go from Dallas because of his alcohol abuse.
That's true.
And I don't think we ever really learned what happened in particular there, but it could be a similar situation. The only other thing I'm worried about is I hope it wasn't some sort of slur or something like
Yeah.
that. Again, because that's technically not criminal. He technically wouldn't be getting in trouble for it. But at the same time, I feel like if that's what happened, you wouldn't be getting this alcohol narrative to the same extent. And his apology would be really weird if it came out that it was like more than that. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's hard to know what to think. And that's why I think in this case, transparency is important.
Mm-hmm.
Because without it, it led to a bunch of rumors. And even though it was kind of funny scrolling on Twitter and seeing a bunch of people speculating about something that absolutely did not happen, um, that's what happens when you don't tell like people on Twitter, the hockey fans what happened. They're gonna speculate. And like, is it right? Probably not, but that's being on social media. And I find it kind of ridiculous that the Blackhawks don't understand that at this point. It seems like they're being really cagey, and that's not really the move here. Like, you don't need to release a video or detail exactly what happened to the minute, but just a general description. Like, I feel like it would allow a lot of people to pass judgment on what happened.
Yeah, and like whoever originally started the rumors about Corey Perry, obviously shame on them, because it was a rumor that implicated other people, a teammate's family member, and just basically badmouth them to everyone just by being like, oh, this is what happened, this is what Perry did. And that rumor also involves someone else, a woman who should not have had her name brought into this situation whatsoever. So that's incredibly frustrating. But you're 100% correct that when the organization doesn't say anything and is so vague about what it was, that of course these kinds of rumors are going to come out, because the information that they did give us was that it was specifically not a criminal issue, it was a workplace issue, and they waited a few days before actually saying clearly that it did not involve teammates or teammates' family members, because Kyle Davidson essentially had to just come out and have a press conference where he said that Corey Perry did not do this. He did not do this specific rumor that we won't mention, which was very awkward to watch. I felt bad for Kyle Davidson that he had to go out there and basically just have that entire press conference only to squash this one rumor because the team didn't get ahead of it and actually give any specific details on what the issue was. They let it fester for like 5 days. And of course there's going to be stupid rumors at that point when, again, when we know that it's not criminal and it has to do with workplace stuff, there's a small number of things that it could be. And especially because, as I said, he didn't go into the player assistance program or anything like that, people would probably also assume that it wouldn't have to do with alcohol or drugs. So then you get people guessing, and it was just very stupid of the Blackhawks organization to handle it the way they did. Once again, I'm not impressed with the Blackhawks organization. Big surprise there, eh?
The big surprise. And yeah, I agree completely. Like, the entire situation doesn't happen if the Blackhawks get ahead of this. And because they were silent for so long, like, the rumor online just propagated into a big meme. So it went semi-viral in the hockey community, essentially. None of that happens if they just come out and say, yeah, it was a workplace incident involving alcohol. Even if they outlined it by that little, people wouldn't have started that rumor. It wouldn't have come up in people's heads. But they're just being purposely vague, purposely cagey. It's like they haven't learned how to handle these situations at all. And it's bewildering to me that they haven't been punished more for the stuff that happened. And I think the continuous nature of that and looking at awkward situations like this, I know it's not technically their fault in that I know they didn't make Corey Perry do this, but at the same time, it's rough to not see them overextend, be super transparent, knowing what their past is.
Exactly. And they did a disservice to Corey Perry himself. They did a disservice to themselves for letting all this drama fester around their team that was entirely preventable in terms of the rumors. They did a service to the woman who was involved in the rumor, and they did a disservice to the other teammate who was involved in the rumor. So just bad all around in the way that they handled it. And I don't know, in terms of where we go from here, there was a quote from Frank Saravalli saying that there's been a couple of teams in the past couple of days that may be interested in bringing Corey Perry in. So you have to wonder if he does come back to the NHL, because I feel like this would be just a really sad way for his career to end. He was probably on track to be a Hall of Fame player, but this is if his career is over from this, it might be a little bit in jeopardy or something. But it's entirely possible that the incident wasn't too bad in the end, but it was something where he had to get cut from the team. Maybe another team picks him up and he's able to finish off his career in a better manner, and he gets the help that he needs if he does have a problem. I hope that's how it plays out. I hope that we haven't seen the last of him, just in the sense of that I hope it wasn't so bad that his career is just totally ruined from this.
I agree. I sympathize with him, of course, with prejudgment in mind. I think it's an awful situation. He must feel awful. I remember hearing about Bobby Ryan when he had his incident at an airport, and just feeling terrible for the guy, because from all accounts he's a great guy, but it just, things like that are really difficult to deal with. So I hope he gets the help he needs. And I mean, he had 9 points in 16 games on Chicago. And was he a Bedard merchant a little bit? He probably was he playing too high in the lineup? Probably. That's what Chicago could offer, but he can still play. So if the incident isn't that bad and he's able to deal with his demons in an effective way, I do hope we see him back. I do hope he gets another chance.
Yeah, obviously it's possible that the incident, what it was, ends up leaking out, and we think that it's something where, no team should pick him up again after that. That's possible, but I think the optimist in me hopes that it's something that he can come back from, and something that people will accept him back from, and it's not something that he'll have to be totally canceled over, because you don't want to see that. You want to hope for the best in people, so even though he did have a bad moment, have a mistake that ended up in this situation, I hope that it ends up being a bit of a happier ending for the end of his career here.
Yeah, I mean, based on his track record, it is a Hall of Fame career, and it would be nice. The optimist in me hopes that he's able to finish that off in a prouder way than this.
Hmm. And from there, our next topic, someone's career who is not over, but is on pause for the moment. We had another coach firing in the NHL this week, which was Dean Evason of the Minnesota Wild, replaced by John Hynes, former Devils and Predators coach, I believe. Um, Minnesota, I can't believe how poorly they started the season. I feel like it's been a little bit under the radar because Edmonton, with that earlier coach firing, they took all the media headlines in terms of, wow, how the hell are they this bad? But Minnesota was the quiet team being extremely bad and performing under expectations. So I'm not too surprised that their coach was fired in the end, but also in terms of their roster, like I feel like Dean Evason was held like kind of dealt a little bit of a tough hand here because this is the season where the Minnesota Wild finally have that 14.7 million cap hit penalty on their roster from
Jeez.
the Parise and Suter buyouts. So obviously they weren't able to add to the roster at all this summer. They just kind of had to stand pat and probably not bring certain players back. I don't know who they've lost from last year other than Matt Dumba, but that is still a loss. So obviously they basically just weren't able to improve the roster at all whatsoever, and they're gonna have that cap hit penalty for another season next year too. So the GM was literally not able to make a better team based off of those cap restraints, and the coach pays for it in the end because they just haven't been good enough. It's a rough situation in Minnesota.
Yeah, I feel this is not like the exact same as the Jay Woodcroft situation, but similar in that the roster probably wasn't handled as well as it could have been. Granted, huge asterisk, like you said, that 14 million, you're never going to get by that. That's going to hurt your team no matter what. But same in the same way as Jay Woodcroft, Evason has had terrible goaltending on Minnesota. Awful. Philip Gustafson, after having an amazing season last year, has started off horribly.
Hmm.
Fleury has done a little bit better, but it still hasn't been great. And honestly, like the last couple seasons, Evason has been good. He's had a
Yeah.
positive record in Minnesota. He's brought them to the playoffs a couple times. Um, so it's like to me, it kind of seems similar in that it's a situation where the goaltending is so bad that it basically erases every other positive stat. And like you said, the roster couldn't grow because of the cap implications. So all that working together, I understand why he got let go, but I'm curious because I want to go look further into what the Minnesota Wild fans think because they're the ones that really know. When Jay Woodcroft got fired, Edmonton Oilers fans were angry, and that's what told me, okay, when your team is bad and you're angry about the coach being fired, that's when you know it's a little bit like this shouldn't have happened.
Hmm.
So jury's still kind of out on it, but I was not surprised, but a little shocked when it happened.
Yeah, there were some interesting quotes from Dean Evison after being fired too, because the wonderful Michael Russo from The Athletic was interviewing him after the firing went down. He was it was apparently very emotional, where both Evison and Guerin just started crying. It seemed like it was something that Guerin didn't want to have to do. He wanted to stick by his guy, but it was just that the results weren't there. So a bit of an unfortunate situation where I think they ideally would have liked to keep him, but it just things weren't trending up at all. It was just continuing to get worse. And another quote that I liked from this was that he was. I don't have the exact quote up here, but he was talking a lot about how now that he's not coaching, he's just gonna take a bunch of like vacation time and go visit all his kids and stuff, and go places with his wife, which I think is very very funny and nice to see that after such a shitty start to the season, like yeah he gets fired, but at least he gets to chill for a little bit and have a bit of peace of mind and get ready for the next chapter in his career because he did have very good success for a few seasons there with Minnesota, so I would expect him to pick up another head coaching job eventually in the NHL. And the last quote from the Russo piece was Evason basically saying, and this is a direct quote now, "I didn't wake up today thinking I'm a shitty coach. I woke up today thinking I'm a fucking good coach. I can coach. I'm ready to coach." So even though he's happy to take a little bit of a break after this, he has the drive to be a coach and get back in this league as soon as possible, it seems. So I think it'll be really interesting to watch if another team who may fire their coach later in the season, if they try to pick him up, or if he's going to take some time off and maybe interview for head coaching jobs in the off season. I think that'll be really interesting to watch.
I think so too, and I love that mentality. Like, come back, be better, be the best you can be, and that's what he's preaching. That's what Evason is preaching, and I think he's earned the time off. You take it, spend time with your family, and forget hockey for a little bit. Come back with a fresh, cleared mind, and try to enter a situation where you can succeed and have a good time again. Have fun. That's the most important thing when you're working in a sport that you love. I'm going to rotate a bit, like on the same topic. John Hynes comes in as his replacement.
Yeah.
I don't love that for Minnesota.
I feel
Everywhere
like
John Hynes has
no
gone,
one
he's
likes
just
him.
been
I feel like no fan
disappointing.
bases like John Hynes. Every time he's been
Yeah.
hired, people are like, "Why did we hire him?" It's weird.
I know, like, he doesn't have like a good record anywhere he's gone. Like, he was not great in New Jersey. He was bad with the Predators, and they eventually had to get rid of him because of that. Like, it's the classic NHL like recycling coaches, which I get, but why do you keep recycling bad coaches?
Yeah.
Like, maybe it finally works, but that's not the trend. So
It's very weird. He coached the Devils after coaching in AHL Wilkes-Barre Scranton for a while, and he had consistently good records with that team, and second round, third round playoff appearances. But then getting his first head coaching job with the Devils, he had only one good season, which was the Taylor Hall MVP season that everyone remembers. Then after that, they completely sucked again the next year. He lasted another full season where they missed the playoffs by a lot, and then he was let go 26 games into the next season. Goes to Nashville. Everyone was like, "Why the hell did we hire him?" I don't remember. Barry Trotz was already gone from Nashville at that point, right? I think they probably had someone else before then, but it was just a case of like, really, we're going with this guy who like only had was like a 1-year wonder with the Devils and then bottomed out. He at least was able to get the Preds into the playoffs a couple times, but then couldn't do it last year. They finished just a couple points out, I think, and it was kind of disappointing because the Western wildcards last year, it was like no one wanted to get in. It was like instead of a bunch of teams trying to win, instead of a bunch of teams going in like hot streaks in the last couple of weeks of the season to get into that wild card spot, it was just like everyone was losing. Everyone who had a chance to get into those spots was losing, and Nashville was one of those teams that just couldn't get in. So in terms of this guy's resume, I don't know what it is that Minnesota sees here that they're like, this is the guy to get us back to the playoffs. Like, maybe he's good with young player development or something, but I see Minnesota as more of a veteran team other than like Matt Boldy and Brock Faber. So I don't really get it. It's weird. Obviously, there's something about this guy that GMs and organizations like, but as a fan, just looking at his resume, it doesn't jump out right away.
no, it didn't for me either. It just seems like kind of a weird hire, like a change for the sake of change, which sometimes is what a team needs. But in this case, I would have liked Minnesota to swing higher. Like, honestly, Jay Woodcroft is available. Like, that wouldn't have been a bad option. Granted, I don't know if he's looking for coaching. He did just get fired a couple weeks ago, so maybe he's taking a break. But that's someone who I think is better that you could give a shot. Even someone like Gerard Gallant. I know he has like a shorter shelf life for coaches, but he starts off pretty well usually in the teams he goes to. So it wouldn't be bad to give him a shot. John Hynes just seems like a weird play, and if it works out, that's great, but I don't think anyone expects it to.
I'm glad you mentioned Gerard Gallant because it's very weird to me that he doesn't have a job in the NHL right now. This guy, everywhere he goes, he turns the team around right away, has one or two really good years, then they kind of slow down a little bit, so maybe his coaching style doesn't last very long, his effectiveness kind of wears off. But it's weird to me, like, I think he would have fit in a team like Minnesota because you have this cap issue for this season and next season, so why not get this coach that is really good at having a quick turnaround with your team, and use them for these couple of years where you're really cap strapped and you can't do much in terms of roster moves to improve the team. I feel like he would have been a good fit, actually, just with his track record. I feel like that would have been a match.
No, you're right about that because he's a coach that's gotten his team to play above expectations routinely. And that's what Minnesota needs because they don't have the cap space to make the team better. So they have to play better than what they are. And that's where he seems to excel in the first couple of years, at least. So, yeah, no, I agree with that. I find it weird that they didn't give him a shot. But John Hynes it is, I guess.
Yeah, I guess so. And last question on this topic. Do you think, looking at the Minnesota roster, that they'll be able to turn it around this season?
They do have talent. I like Matt Boldy. I like Kirill Kaprizov. Eriksson Ek is having a good start to the season. They do have some depth there. But their defense is a little rough for the most part, besides Jared Spurgeon. They don't have like a ton of depth because of the fact they can't really pay for any. I don't know if they really have the personnel to really push them in a better direction. It sucks, but this might just be kind of a write-off season until you can get more cap space when the cap goes up next year. The buyouts hopefully get a little better in a couple years, and then you can really try to turn it around. But it does suck because Kaprizov is old. Like he spent a good amount of time in the KHL, right? Like he came over here when he was like 24, 25. So you don't really want to waste his prime. That's also a thing. So I definitely don't envy the spot they're in right now. And I would frankly be surprised if they were able to push the playoffs. But what do you think, Maude?
I pretty much agree with you. I think they'll play better for the rest of the season, but I don't know if they'll be able to go on such a heater that they get in because they are right next to Edmonton in the standings, one less point with one less game played. And I feel like it's unlikely for Edmonton to make the playoffs at this point, but everyone kind of gives them the benefit of the doubt that with McDavid and Draisaitl having the ability to go on heaters, they can just, win 10 games in a row out of nowhere. And then even if they're just like a little bit above average for the rest of the season, that might be enough that they can make it in. I feel like we trust the Oilers to be able to go on crazy stretches, whereas the Minnesota Wild, not so much. It's basically, it's a team with decent depth, but then just kind of the one star in Kaprizov and maybe Boldy. Maybe he will have a bit of an improvement this season and really be like establishing himself into that superstar tier. It's possible. I do really like him, but I don't think they'll get back into the playoffs this year. I don't think there's enough high-end talent on this roster. And I'm glad that you mentioned about Kaprizov, actually, because that's where I was going next, is that he has 3 years left, including this year. So 2 more years after this year on a $9 million contract, and then he's UFA. So 3 years left on his deal, and 2 of them is with the $14.7 million cap penalty. After that ends, like you better turn this around either this year or next year, because then after that ends, you have Kaprizov on an expiring deal. Maybe at that point, then you spend a bunch of money to try to load up because suddenly you'll have $14.7 million of cap space. But you got to get your ass in gear and fix this team pretty quickly. Otherwise, Kaprizov might be looking at free agency in a few years.
I do also want to say, I forgot about this till now, but they did also recently give Marcus Foligno $4 million for some incredible reason.
Yeah, what the hell?
They extended him. So it's going to be even harder to get that depth personnel. And I understand that he's not bad. Like, he's performed kind of well.
How did he earn a raise?
I know. Like, it's way too much. So, I mean, they're strapping themselves for the future there.
He was already making $3 million. And I know he had a good season a couple of good seasons a couple years ago, but last season he wasn't good, only 7 goals, 21 points in 65 games. So how do you give him a raise at this point to $4 million? Like, I guess the cap has gone up a little bit, but to me, the previous cap hit seemed more than fair. So that's a little bit of a weird one there, but they do at least have Matt Zuccarello taking a pay hit at the same time. He's going down by $2 million next year, which is nice of him to do as a veteran player. He wants to stay there and take a pay cut to help the team win.
Good for Zuccarello. That's big of him, honestly.
Yeah, so interesting for Minnesota. I think the fans maybe we'll have to see what they think of John Hynes and how they do with John Hynes, but I have to think that they were probably at least relieved that the organization is trying to make a change. And where I'm going with this is that we have to talk about the Senators, where everyone is completely pissed that the organization seems completely unwilling to make a change. New ownership, we were all super excited in the first couple months of the season as that new ownership was getting confirmed, and now we're already disagreeing with their philosophy so quickly, and it has to do with the coaching. Similar to how Edmonton dissimilar, not similar at all, to how Edmonton and Minnesota have actually just gone ahead and had accountability and fired their coaches after bad starts. We have the Sens just refusing to fire a coach who is having the team playing worse than last year somehow, despite the record. They refuse to fire him because they want stability and they want less drama, which is really weird to me because constantly losing and constantly not even looking like you have a chance in games and only occasionally winning just off of luck, off of like a great play by someone like Stützle or Tkachuk, and barely winning, scraping out a win. Not very good for stability. Unless you want the stability to be that you just suck. Like, we can be consistently bad if that's what they want. Like, that's the only stability that I'm seeing here. So I really don't understand what the hell the Sens are doing. How are you feeling about it?
I agree with you 110%. I understand this team has been through so much drama over the last 6 years, and this was the season where a lot of that was supposed to change. It didn't. We had the Shane Pinto suspension. The loss to the first round pick also happened. And Andlauer is the new owner. He's been here for less than half a season at this point. All the Sens fans have been here for, well, the last decade. They've seen what this team has been. I understand why he comes into this and he's like, I don't want to be reactionary. Him and Steve Staios, just to be clear. I understand why they come into this and say, we don't want to be reactionary. We want to just see what happens. They didn't even really want to fire Dorion. It only happened because it had to. They want to stand pat, observe, get the players some stability. I understand all that. But the point has to be made, like you said, we're not getting that with the team losing this way. Are you really getting less drama, getting more stability by hearing fire DJ chants every home game?
Mm-hmm.
You're not. And I do understand you want to have a GM in place before you hire a coach. You want the GM to pick someone that can be his guy. I do understand that. But DJ is just a dead man walking at this point. Like, the second you hire a new GM, the second you have an ugly loss after that, I guarantee you he's fired.
Mm-hmm.
He will be gone the second after that. And, like, if you watch his body language after the last game, he knows that. Like, if you just saw how he was answering questions, how he fell on the sword, which I'll talk about that later. But he fell on the sword. He took all of the blame, and he seemed really down on it. And I feel bad for him because DJ does seem like a really awesome guy. I don't wish any ill will, but he's clearly not the person to coach this team at this point, and it's embarrassing. Like, it's not bringing any more stability. It's not making the team any less dramatic. Like, I know you don't want to make two moves. You don't want to hire an intern and then to get a real coach or establish the intern. I get it. But something needs to change.
I get that.
Here.
I get that you don't typically hire a coach before hiring the GM, and the new GM will always want to hire his guy. But in my mind, I feel like that's just a little bit of an arbitrary rule because in the here and now, this coach is not good enough. So why do you just stay with him and waste the whole season until you will bring in a new GM in the offseason? Like you said, DJ is just a sitting duck at this point. He'll coach out the rest of the season, I guess, but then the new GM is just going to want his new coach anyway. So DJ's gone at that point anyway. So if you want stability, at least, why don't you at least try to hire a good coach now? And then if the new GM doesn't like him, I mean, like, can't you work around that, right? Like, I feel like you should be able to find a GM that's at least cool with that coach, you know? Like, you should hire someone that's at least good. Is it just like an ego thing where the GM wants to always be the guy who hires the coach? Like, do you think that's all it is? Because to me, I feel like they could try to find a good coach now and then bring in a GM later and just have them work together. And then if it doesn't work, then yeah, then the GM can bring in his new guy. And obviously then you're making a lot more changes, which is the stability. They want the stability instead. They want to just keep DJ and waste a whole season and then bring in a GM and coach at the same time. But in my mind, it's just wasting time and pissing off the fans. Like, do you think it's silly that that they have to wait for a new GM to get a coach, or is it just me?
I think you make a lot of great points there, to be honest, and I agree with you. Honestly, like just thinking about it, I don't understand why we don't do kind of a Martin St. Louis sort of setup. Not necessarily getting a player coach, but when St. Louis was hired, the idea was we're not sure if he's going to be coaching like long term. We're trying him out. Like he got like a 1 year contract. And the trend nowadays actually is coaches are getting shorter and shorter terms on their contract. So I'm kind of wondering, why don't you bring in someone like Jacques Martin, who might not want like a 5 year coaching contract because he's pretty old at this point, and give him like a 1 or 2 year deal, be like, see how you like coaching again, see how you like being the head man. And it can't be worse because if he comes in and he sucks, it doesn't matter because he'll get replaced anyway. And if he comes in and he's great, that's better than what's happening now. Because it's exactly like you said. If you keep DJ, it's going to be a lost season unless something absolutely miraculous happens. And the only reason this team is 500 is because of the high-end talent on this team. Because of Brady Tkachuk, Stützle, Giroux, Chabot, Sanderson, and Chychrun in some games, and Korpisalo playing out of his mind in some games. That's the only reason they were 500. It is not a coaching thing. They've looked uninspired in multiple losses. You need to pull the plug on this now.
It is insane to me that they did not make a coaching change after that Florida game, because that was the most fire the coach now game that I have ever seen. They did not threaten to score a goal for a good 95% of that game, despite many power play opportunities. You are telling me that this team still really likes this coach? They don't play like it. They don't play like they believe his system can win. I don't know if it's just that the tactics and the system are that bad, but they're worse than last year already. Like last year we had the occasional stinker, but I feel like in most of our games we were still at least more competitive. But most of the games this year we're just always chasing the game, and it's just brutal. So to me it seems like they talk about the stability and they want to keep DJ just because the players like him. But to me it feels like I'm watching a team that's quit on the coach, which is weird because obviously they like him, but whatever it is, it's not working anymore. So I'm just like absolutely baffled that with the amount of big breaks we've had in the schedule that we haven't taken those opportunities to make a coaching change when there's a gap in between games. We've had like 4 giant gaps in between games and just nothing. And most of the time we're coming off bad losses before those gaps. The fans have had to sit for like an entire week off of a horrible loss like 3 times already this season. It's just ugly at this point. So I don't even really know what my point is here, but I'll throw it back to you because I'm just getting pissed off at this point.
No, all good. Like, I mean, I agree. And 1 in 7 in the last 8 home games. The fans have been witnessing this. They've been here for this.
Yep.
It's not like they've been shitty on the road. They've been shitty here.
We've barely played on the road is the thing.
Exactly.
And usually
it only gets harder.
Usually most teams are worse on the road, and yet we suck ass at home. So that's why I'm really scared for December, because unless we're just magically really good on the road, we've already wasted all of our fucking home games. We should have been winning at like a few more of them at least to be competitive at this point. Even if we weren't like looking amazing during those games, we should have at least been able to get a few more wins or even some loser points to look decent in the standings. But we couldn't even do that when we had the softest home schedule ever. We could not do it. It's just absolutely pathetic. I don't know how you can think that it's going to get better without a change.
It's true. Like, if you look back at previous seasons, Ottawa has always been a worse team on the road, and I don't see why that would change here. So it's only getting worse from here. You're only getting a busier schedule from here. You had all your big breaks. If you want to make a coaching change now, it's almost guaranteed to be awkward unless you fire him during Christmas, which I'm sure you don't want to do. And getting back to the Florida game for a second,
Mhm.
I agree with you completely. It was probably, and I'm trying not to be hyperbolic, but the most embarrassing loss I've ever seen from the Sens.
Yeah.
That was the make it or break it moment. That's the DJ you're done moment. And I know that like there's a lot of conjecture. I know the players seem to like the coach. And I know like the point I'm about to make is very much conjecture. But it really seems like these players are just happy to have their paycheck, happy that DJ doesn't do anything when they do poorly. He's just like, it's okay, you'll get him next time. The bounces will be better. And they're like, oh, that's great. I don't need to worry about anything. That's fine. I'm getting paid. I'm making money. I'm enjoying my life in the NHL. Like, if something happens, I'm going to have my coach there to back me up. It's not my fault. I don't need to play better. And that, I know that's like not provable, but during their post game presser, like that I previously mentioned, TJ comes out, says it is my fault. It is not my fault. It is completely my fault that the players were not ready for that game. I should have had them ready. That's on me. And
Mhm.
you know what, DJ? You're a nice guy. Good on you for taking the blame, falling on the sword. You need after that game to tear into your players.
Yep.
You need to have a Rick Tocchet moment where you come out and say, they were terrible. They played like they didn't want to win that game. They put in zero effort. I am astonished by what I saw. These players are shit. They need to come back. They need to be better. They're getting bag skated for an hour and a half tomorrow instead of the 35-minute practice that you had instead. They need to learn that it's not acceptable. There's
Mhm.
no accountability here. And that's the entire reason the DJ tenure here is not going to work if you keep him. The players aren't going to learn. They like that's one reason why I'm curious about a coach like Patrick Waugh, because he would come in here and he would tear those players apart if you saw that effort. And I know like that doesn't guarantee the team wins, but they need to learn that what they did isn't acceptable. It's
Mhm.
not a game that was about bad bounces. DJ, you didn't play well at 5-on-5. You were trash. Just because all the goals were scored on the power play for the most part doesn't mean you played well. You had way less high danger scoring chances. Um, and guess what? Just because Calgary was in a funk and doing better now doesn't mean the same thing's going to happen to you.
The
Like
Calgary quote pissed me off, man.
it's horrible narratives, horrible, and it keeps getting worse. It's like we've hit rock bottom and DJ's like, here's a shovel. It's
Mhm.
absolutely crazy what he isn't willing to do here.
It
I
it feels like all of his quotes, instead of being like, oh, here's what we need to do to improve, or like, oh, like just blatantly calling out how bad this is getting, all of his quotes are just sugarcoating everything, right? And just being like, trying to find the positives in everything. And I get that you don't want to completely harp on negativity, but how are you going to improve if you come out of that fucking Panthers game and say that we were good 5-on-5? Mostly good 5-on-5 when we had I literally only remember one scoring chance 5-on-5 in that entire game.
exactly. I only remember like one or two, and we didn't do any better on the power play, so it doesn't matter anyway. 0 for 6, that's great. And the very next night, the Florida Panthers, they go out, they play the Toronto Maple Leafs. Toronto
That
has
was such a better game. I watched that game too, and it was actually entertaining. Unlike the Sens just fucking stinking it up, it was actually two good teams. Unlike watching the Sens play the Panthers.
exactly. And you know, in the first period, the Leafs played terrible. They were getting run around by Florida, but it was only 1-0. And
Mm-hmm.
you want to know what happened? Sheldon Keefe tears into his players on the bench. There's a clip of him just shouting at them, yelling. And I'm not trying to be a proponent of verbal abuse. I think there is a line, and if you cross that, you're a garbage human. I want to make that clear. But if the players are not playing well enough, you need to let them know. You cannot say, oh, we'll get them next time. The bounces will be better. Oh, this is on the reffing. Or just yell at the refs. Like, that's a bad call. No, if they're playing badly, tear into them. Bench one of your good players. Bench Tim Stützle. Bench Jake Sanderson. Bench Jacob Chikrin. Bench Brady Tkachuk. Bench Claude Giroux. They all deserve it. During that game, they all deserved
Yeah.
it. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's absolutely laughable. And guess what? After Sheldon Keefe had that talk with the Toronto Maple Leafs, they played way better. They
Mm-hmm.
reset.
Totally
It
turned it
shows that it
around.
can work. Exactly. And I know like the game how they won completely janked. And
Hey, but
obviously,
they got it to OT. Sens
they
can't
got it to
fucking
OT.
Sens can't get to OT in the first fucking place ever, never getting any overtime points or anything.
Exactly. Exactly.
That was the second time this season already that we have watched the Sens get embarrassed by a team, and then that team goes into Toronto for their next game, and Toronto does way better in a similar situation. Earlier in the season, Tampa came in here and whooped us 6-4. We were down 4-1 after the second period, and our comeback attempt was frankly pathetic. I know that we got a few goals in the third period, but it was mostly lucky bounces, and we were never actually carrying play, bringing it to them, and actually dominating and creating momentum. It was just like, oh, we got a lucky one, and then they come back the other way and score 30 seconds later, and I don't think we ever actually got within one goal. It was always a 2-goal gap the whole time. So pathetic comeback attempt. The Sens can never come back in games. And then they go to Toronto 2 days later, go up 4-1 after the first period, and guess who won that game? Don't even need to answer the question.
I wonder.
And then we have it again. Florida absolutely embarrassing the Sens, dominating them on the shot clock. It was triple shots at one point. It was like 18-6 at one point. And as you said, similar thing in the first period against the Leafs and Panthers. But the Leafs were actually able to turn it around because they have semi-competent coaching. Leafs fans will say shit about Sheldon Keefe all they want, but oh boy, you're glad you don't have fucking DJ Smith, because you will not ever see a game turn around in terms of momentum under this guy. You watch the first period, and that's how the whole game's going to go, pretty much.
Exactly. And I mean, the statistics support it. DJ is one of the worst coaches in the league when it comes to having the empty net. We can't do it. It's something like a 2 in like 130 or something record when the Sens pull the goalie. It's ridiculous. He just can't get these players to really push the gear when they need to. And I think it's about accountability. That's what this is all about. He can't hold any of these players to any standard because he just wants to be their friend too much. And I get that was really important during the rebuild while players were growing, but it's not what the team needs now. Not at all. And the fact that they will not make a coaching change because they're worried about drama, they're worried about stability, it's only going to get worse. This is a Canadian hockey market. I'm sorry, but it doesn't get quieter. If you keep losing, they're going to show you. They're going to show you through social media. They're going to show you through their wallets. And like, I've been hearing a lot on Twitter about a bunch of Sens fans that are like, yeah, I canceled my tickets. I don't see a reason to go.
People are already pissed. People on Twitter, lots of people are already saying, I don't even want to watch the games anymore. I've already tuned out. 2 months into the season. This is the thing too, is because we technically have a better record than we usually do 2 months into the season under DJ Smith, and it's still that bad because even in the games that we win, we don't look very good. So the Ottawa fan base is smart. We're not a bunch of idiots. We see the product on the ice regardless of win or lose, which has been sketchy results in that department. But regardless of the results on the ice, we see that this team is not good, and people are just tired of it at this point with the organization's unwillingness to make a change. I think it's very silly. I think that new ownership just doesn't really understand what we've been through for so long, what we've been waiting for. Because the thing is, we're one game below 500. Yeah, we already did the 500 thing last year. We finished a few games above 500 last year. The standards are higher at this point. We're supposed to be improving and challenging for the playoffs. So in my mind, even though our record right now is better than it usually is after November, that's a very low bar to clear, and it's worse than how we finished last season. It's on pace to be worse than how we finished last season. So unless we can somehow be better in the second half of the season like last year, which is possible, we're probably still fucked, because even if you do that, you're behind the 8 ball once again, below 500, last in the Eastern Conference after 2 months. I know that we've played less games than other teams, but the way that this team is playing, do we really think that we're going to win all those games in hand? No fucking way.
No way.
We're just going to continue at the same pace. If we have 7 games in hand, we're probably winning 3 and losing 4 in regulation. So the games in hand don't fucking matter.
Exactly. And one thing that I remember from last season, it was like, statistically speaking, it was a worse November. But I remember one thing with this team last season, they were getting a ton of chances and could not finish. The metrics seem to show the Senators were a better team than their record last November, if I
Yep.
remember
Yep.
correctly. This season, it's the exact opposite.
Complete
Every
opposite.
single notable metric shows that the Senators are doing better than they should, and they're below 500.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, it could get better. DJ Smith teams seem to play better in the second half of the season. But this has been the problem for every year since the start of the rebuild. Awful, horrific Novembers. And if DJ can't learn to adapt and make his team better just for that, how do we expect that to improve? How do we expect him to improve the defensive structure? How do we expect him to improve the power play? How do we expect him to improve the offense? It's not going to happen. I know the owners haven't, but the fans have seen everything that this coach is at this point.
Mm-hmm.
You're not getting a different DJ. DJ Smith is what he is. He's a great players coach. He is not smart enough tactically to run a team and get them into the playoffs. That's just the truth. And you need to make a change to stop the bleeding. You have to, and it honestly like incenses me that they just think that they shouldn't. They just think that we can stand pat if we have another lost season. That's okay. It's not okay for the fans. That's the truth.
I'm glad you brought up the metrics like from last season and this season too, because last year I kind of forgot about that whole like bad shooting percentage thing that came into play in the first 2 months of the season. Is that, yeah, like our expected goals for and stuff was way better than what the results actually were. But now we're being carried by scoring goals above expected and having pretty good finishing rates. And I actually have some of the metrics, the defensive metrics open here that are way worse than last year that I wanted to run down quickly. So this is from Everyday Sens on Twitter.
Oh boy.
Last season, so this is when it was better last season. We were ranked 25th in goals against per 60, ranked 17th in expected goals against per 60, ranked 15th in high danger chances against per 60, and ranked 19th in shots against per 60. So a couple of those stats near the bottom, a couple of them more near the middle of the league, especially the high danger chances against 15th. That's not that bad, but obviously not good enough to be in the playoffs. This season so far, goals against per 60 ranked 28th. Expected goals against per 60 ranked 26th. High danger chances against ranked per 60 ranked 28th. And shots against per 60 ranked 26th. That is bottom 5 for fucking every stat. So
Incredible.
just I can't deal with this shit anymore. The proof is in the pudding in the numbers. Despite the we're only one game below 500. We'll win the next 3 and then we'll be fine. No, not happening. You suck.
And funny you bring up the statistics. A couple days ago, DJ said, "Yeah, we've been better 5-on-5 defensively." They're really starting to buy in. If you look like at our expected defensive goals, it looks fine. And I forget exactly how he worded it, but Everyday Sens looked into it and it's like, yeah, I mean, if you look at this statistic in a very specific, narrow viewpoint, sure, it looks okay. But if you look at every other statistic you can verifiably see, it's god awful. He's absolutely wrong. And the excuses just have to stop.
Mm-hmm.
That's the biggest thing. Like, either tear into this team, tear into the players when it doesn't go well, or talk about what you can do better. Instead of just saying, well, I just didn't get them prepared enough.
Yep.
That means nothing to a fan. That means nothing. Like, we don't know how practices are formed. We don't know how they're supposed to be. We don't understand the load management aspect of the team unless you're there, but we're not.
Mm-hmm.
So it's nothing. It's nothing soup. What are we supposed to take from that? It's incredible to me that he's allowed to go up, make these excuses, take ownership for things that he shouldn't take ownership of. And ownership is like, we'll kick that can down the road, cross that bridge when we come to it. Bridge has been crossed. There's nothing left to do.
It's only going to get
him.
unclear. This is the thing.
Exactly. And you expect the fans to get more civil?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
No.
I was looking for a way to round out this conversation, but there has actually been a trade breaking during this recording.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
The
Vancouver Canucks have acquired Nikita Zadorov from Calgary for a 5th round pick and a 3rd rounder. 3rd and a 5th.
Wow. Okay. That's funny. First trade break during the Extra Attackers podcast.
We got one. We got a live trade reaction. I'm immediately seeing Leafs fans being angry that they didn't trade for him at such a cheap price.
Yeah, I'm honestly surprised. That's a really good trade, I think, because the 3rd is in 2026.
Yeah, they're the
Like,
both of the picks. The 24th, 2024. Yeah, is this year. But then the better round pick is later. So
yeah,
worse
that's
value.
that's nothing. I mean, I know he requested a trade that diminishes his value. Um, but he's been a steady, like pretty good defensive defenseman for
Mm-hmm.
Calgary. So
Good
I thought
depth
they
guy.
get yeah, I thought they'd get at least a second. Like I thought just the fact that several teams were interested. Also, direct rivals like
Mm-hmm.
Vancouver and Calgary.
I
I was
guess
expecting them to squeeze, but
it's weird too because Calgary has turned it around a little bit, and I think they're still one game below 500, but their last 10 games has been pretty good. And because the West is so bad, they're in a wild card spot. So Calgary could still make the playoffs. Like they're doing okay, but I guess Zadorov wanted out bad enough, and that was the best offer that they just had to send him to a divisional rival. I guess the Canucks' start to the season has been so good that Calgary figures like, well, they're just so far ahead of us. They're going to make the playoffs anyway, and we're not really going to be competing with them for a wild card spot at the end of the year.
yeah, I guess that's part of it. I'm just kind of surprised that they didn't wait like maybe until the trade deadline. Like I
Mm-hmm.
understand that he requested a trade and maybe you don't want that mindset on the team for that long, but like you don't necessarily have to honor it right away. Like we've seen situations like Jake DeBrusk where he's requested a trade. He decided to stick around after things kind of improved in that department.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I'm kind of surprised they didn't wait a little longer and just accept this deal, but Vancouver fans, you should be happy. I like him as a player and you guys are doing well, and I think he only adds to that. He's going to be a good piece.
Yeah, I believe Carson Soucy got injured, which is probably the main reason that sparked this trade. They needed a physical left defenseman to step in and replace him for a while. And even when he comes back, it's just great to have both of them for that depth on the left hand side. There's also Kevin Weeks is saying that he thinks the reason that the Leafs didn't end up getting Zadorov was that the Flames would have had to retain salary to make it work. So I think that's probably also another reason that they traded him within the division was to just get rid of the full contract.
That makes sense, actually. Like, I'm surprised Vancouver could afford it, to be honest. I thought they were
Yeah,
really close to the
you
cap.
know what? I'm gonna hit the cap friendly real quick
Yeah, please do.
because
I'm
I
curious
still
about
have it
that.
open. they they obviously have some LTIR space. Um,
Oh, that makes sense,
let's see.
actually.
Yeah, Susie, Pullman, Tucker Pullman. Okay, I think this is what it is. So Carson Susie did go on to LTIR, 3.25 million. Tucker Pullman has been on LTIR since the beginning of the season, and I don't know if this is exactly how this works, but doesn't that essentially just give you his 2.5 million like the whole time?
As long as he's like LTIR, then yeah,
Yeah,
they
yeah,
would
because
get
he's not. I don't think
his
he's
cap hit
coming
back.
back. I don't think he's coming back at any point, so that helps. They may have spent that money already though, because they did trade Beauvillier the other day too, which is the main
That's
thing.
true.
I think he was probably making like 4 million or something.
Something like that. Yeah,
So that
they
would be
did clear cap space. That's
the
what
main
would
way that
yeah,
they cleared cap space. Yeah.
that would work. I mean, honestly, like Bavilier seemed like an extra depth piece for them, and I was surprised that they got so little for him. But at the same time, if you're swapping him out for Zadorov, I mean that seems like a good trade for them.
Yeah, like I think Beauvillier was good after the trade deadline when they got him. I guess it just sucks that he was part of the Bo Horvat deal and you have to give up on him so quickly. Because I did like him as an inclusion in that trade for Vancouver, but it just wasn't working for him this year. I don't think he even has a goal. Maybe he has one goal or something. But he was doing very poorly and he was like in their bottom six. So if it's not working, you might as well just move on and get a piece that you need, especially with Susie getting injured. Get that replacement on defense. So pretty tidy business by the Canucks, I would say. And even though Beauvillier was a piece in the Horvat deal, you still have the first, which I don't know if they used yet. I don't know what year it was, and they still
Yeah,
have Atu Ratti, right? So
that's true.
not
He's
too bad in
intriguing.
the end. I think the Canucks still make out well overall.
No, I agree. I agree. I do think it's funny. Like this is it's funny how so many things work together in the NHL because ostensibly Chicago acquires Bavillier because of what happened with Perry.
You're
They lose
right. You're
Perry.
right.
They need a right winger. They get
Hmm.
Bavillier. Vancouver needs to get rid of Bavillier to trade for Zadorov to fit his cap hit. So it all comes down the line. It's kind of interesting how it works that way. But
Yeah, dominoes.
right, right. So yeah, I like it for Vancouver. That's a good trade.
It seems like you need some weird stuff like that to happen for the trade market to actually open up because it's very rare that we see very many trades in the first couple months of the season anyway. Like, everyone was talking about, oh, Edmonton needs to make a trade, they need to get a goalie, and then all the insider reports was like, no one wants to trade them a goalie, no one wants to actually move a goalie right now, because we've just started the season and most teams are either content with the 2 goalies they've gone with, or they have 3 goalies, and that's because they don't want to give one up. So maybe they'll trade one if you overpay. But usually the trade market is very frozen around this time of year. So it is funny how sometimes you need some weird shit to happen for trades to actually be able to happen.
Yeah, no, it's true. And I mean, Edmonton was scouting Columbus. Maybe they want Merzlikins or Spencer Martin. That looks intriguing.
I mean, I would give Elvis a chance on Edmonton, but if they make a move for Spencer Martin, like he's been good this season compared to what you would expect from him. But if they try to actually like think that he's going to be a goalie on a playoff team, he's not a goalie that's giving you a chance to the playoffs. So I don't know what's gonna happen there. That's a weird one.
I know, yeah, but we'll see. I mean, McDavid's playing better. Maybe there'll be more on an upswing now. See what happens in Edmonton.
Yeah. I think that's where we'll leave it for today. It ended up being a pretty long episode. We had that extra shit at the end, and we could have ranted for so much longer about the Sens too. I feel like we barely even scratched the surface on that topic, which is funny. But I'm sure I'll get to do that on Game Over Ottawa very soon, because I don't expect that things will be getting much better anytime soon.
Yeah.
Especially because we were playing Columbus and Seattle next, and they both also suck this season. So if we don't just beat both of them, it's going to be bad. It's going to be really bad.
If we lose to Columbus and then lose to Seattle, which is a home game, by the way, the very next day, I don't know how you don't buy your DJ. Like, it would be incomprehensible at that point.
I think if that happens, there will be literal protests outside the CTC. There will be picket lines saying fire DJ. There'll be like a whole organized gathering if that happens.
Oh, we're seeing a sign soon. That's for sure.
Oh yeah, we're gonna fire up the billboards again.
Exactly. Oh my God, fire DJ on the 416. Yeah, I can't wait.
It's billboard season in Ottawa.
I do want to add one final note that I just saw on Twitter, just because I think it's important. On Tuesday, Christine Sinclair will play her last game against Australia for Canada.
Oh,
so that's an end of an era right there. So I just wanted to call that out, because I have a lot of good memories of watching her in Olympics, and like I respect her so much. She's incredible, and I think she has the most goals for any female international player. It might
be for all, like, both genders.
Oh, it might be. Okay,
I'll have to fact check it real quick.
Yeah, go for it. But she's had an incredible career. I mean, she brought Canada gold in the Olympics. It was the Olympics, right? Or was it the World Cup?
Olympics.
It was Olympics. I thought it was. She was a part of that team, and I mean, she's like 40 now. She's really put in the effort to stay with it, which is super impressive, especially in a sport like soccer, where I feel a lot of players retire earlier, like in their early 30s even. She's been incredible, and it makes me a little sad to see her go. Like, she's on to better things now. She'll be happier, I think, but it's still bittersweet, as she's a part of my soccer childhood, if you will. So best of luck to Christine.
Yeah, that's awesome. I knew that her retirement game was coming up soon, but I didn't know the exact date. So I'm glad you mentioned that, because I'll have to check in on that for sure. It's the end of an era. She is probably the greatest Canadian athlete of all time amongst, like, men and women. And if I'm looking up the stats correctly here, I believe she does have the most goals of both genders, because it seems that the highest goal total for men is Ronaldo with 128 goals in 205 matches, which is, to be fair, a better, like, goals per game pace than some of the women, but there's a lot of women with more goals than that. And of course, Christine Sinclair right at the top with 190 goals in 322 matches. So more matches, but more goals as well. So she is the queen of soccer. Both genders, she's the best, one of the best strikers ever. So that's awesome. Hey, maybe we can get her to coach the men's national team, because my God, they need help.
Oh yeah, no, that would be welcome. Just her anywhere on the coaching staff would be really cool. And part of me just hopes Australia is like, you know what, Christine, you can score 10 goals on us. Just get that 200.
Get to 200. Oh my God, they have to let her score. We need to send out the greatest goal scorer with one more goal. Just like punch the ball in the box, give us a penalty, and then let her take it, you know?
Do that 10 times.
Yeah, exactly.
That'd be a good call.
Hey, it must be a friendly match too, right? So it doesn't even matter. Like,
Exactly. They're not going to be disappointed.
you don't need to win. We can let us win.
Exactly. But I'll definitely be tuning in, and best of luck to Christine Sinclair.
Yes, a legend retiring. We all wish her the best in the next chapter of her life. That'll do it for today. Thank you everyone so much for watching or listening. If you enjoyed, hit the like button, subscribe on YouTube, follow us on Spotify, and yeah, share it around if you enjoyed. We'll be back again next week with some more NHL news.
Yeah, thanks for tuning in, everyone. Have a good week.